speaker is Christina Parchem. And Christina is a native of Cleveland, Ohio, and while at Columbia College, Chicago. And in addition to studying cultural studies, she pursued a minor in radio and worked in the radio department for 2 years. She's also studied abroad at Yonsei University in Seoul, South Korea, and the University of East London in the UK, where she volunteered at a non-profit ESL, English as a Second Language School for Adults Immigrants in London. She first became interested in Korean culture while in high school, and while studying in Korea, her love for Korea expanded to include Korean history and North Korean politics. When not working on her capstone or in class, Christina enjoys audio production and DJing as a hobby and studying languages, especially Latin, Japanese, Korean, and Spanish. This summer, she plans on gaining more teaching experience and earning her TEFL certificate in order to move to Korea to teach English for a few years. The title of her presentation is Interrogating the Mass Games, Nationalist Ideology and Political Propaganda in Contemporary North Korea. And in this study, Christina Parchem seeks to unpack the mass games, specifically the 2013 Arirang Festival, in order to understand and interrogate how the North Korean state constructs nationalism in a way that legitimizes its ideology of juche, self-reliance. Parchem begins her analysis of the festival by radically contextualizing it within the broader contours of North Korean history, and then moves to provide us with a close critical textual reading of the performance itself. She argues that this cultural and artistic event, performance, should be read as an example of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea's propaganda, and also as a nationalist and ideological celebration of the idealized unity the North Korean people enjoy and their socialism. And in order to address the specificity of North Korean history, she draws on Chomsky's theory of propaganda and Berger's work on publicity to problematize the rather reductive, simplistic, and yet conventional dubbing of the mass games as mere propaganda. The project thus highlights the multiplicity of the possible interpretations and meanings of the mass games, ranging from seeing them as mere propaganda to approaching them as a form of political, publicity, and nationalist art. Without further ado, Christina.
Sorry, thank you very much. The mass games first started in 1946 as a spectacular ideological celebration of the unity of the socialist people of North Korea. From 2002 until 2013, the theme was Arirang Festival and employs over 100,000 gymnasts, acrobats, and soldiers using assorted props from ribbons to hoops to trampolines. 20,000 students make up the backdrop that enhances the aesthetics and narrative of the festival. The third and final component of the games is the music that consists of a substantial orchestra and chorus, although the focal point of the games is the gymnastics. The 2013 Arirang Festival was an especially large occasion as it marked the 60th anniversary of North Korea's liberation, or the end of the Korean War, and as such, ended the country's current theme of Arirang, and it is unknown when the next mass games will be held. Arirang features 4 acts: Japanese colonialism, North Korea's accomplishments, reunification of the Korean peninsula, and the close relationship North Korea shares with China. These first 2 acts, even more so than the latter half, are especially ardent over the achievements of North Korea as a country, and presenting nationalist images meant to invoke an idealized North Korean people in contrast to the famine and other struggles the people have faced. In light of some of the contradictions to the lived experience that can be perceived in the Arirang Festival, I draw on the work of John Berger to help us understand what these historical myths may be trying to achieve. In Ways of Seeing, John Berger says that, quote, "Publicity persuades us of such a transformation by showing us people who have apparently been transformed and are, as a result, enviable. The image then makes him envious of himself as he might be. Yet what makes this self which he might be enviable? The envy of others. Publicity is about social relations," end quote. Berger argues that although publicity is geared to present generations, it never actually points to the present. It may be mindful of the past, but publicity is always thinking and living in the future. Whether it is food, clothes, or something no one needs, publicity does not sell these objects, it sells what a person could be with this commodity. It is the publisher's hope that the people who see their publicity will desire to be the object of envy from others, what Berger calls glamour, and in this desire to be transformed into something glamorous. The viewer will turn this desire against themselves and envy the version of themselves that could be. Although for subjects, the world of publicity is the future of envious possibilities, publicity will present itself as living in the present. Publicity's present is the subject's future. Hence, the world of glamour is isolated from the rest of the present world. Even in its references to the past, publicity seeks isolation from its viewers. In allusions to the past, publicity positions itself as a higher authority that possesses cultural value as well as glamour. But in order to be unquestionable as a cultural authority, publicity must rely on vagueness. Quote, "The fact that they are imprecise and ultimately meaningless is an advantage. They should not be understandable. They should merely be reminiscent of cultural lessons half-learnt. Publicity makes all history mythical, but to do so effectively, it needs a visual language with historical dimensions," end quote. This is why publicity places so much importance on presenting an aesthetically pleasing advertisement. If it can speak the visual language of the viewer, publicity can properly give the pretense of being culturally elite and authoritative. Publicity does not need to be historically accurate to be effective. It must simply draw on an easily recognizable cultural lesson in order to appear authoritative while appealing to the visual language of the viewer in order to rouse envy of the future self. Publicity seeks to make the viewer unhappy, not with society itself, but with one's position in it. Publicity suggests that if just this one little thing were to happen, the viewer's life would become better, would become the object of envy, and be in a position in society that would provide happiness. The fault is never to be found with society, but with the viewer. The fact that publicity never questions society brings up another crucial function it serves. In placing minute, inconsequential decisions at the forefront and focal point of all decisions made by the viewer, larger political decisions are obscured and, quote, all that is undemocratic, end quote, becomes masked along with what is happening outside the world of publicity. Larger freedoms are sacrificed in exchange for brand choice. Publicity enlightens its own politics, its own world, its own issues to fix with the same authority it established as a historical cultural force. Publicity creates its own standard for society, one in which everyone looks to a glamorous future where they are culturally relevant, a future where they have nothing to envy, but where the rest of the world envies them. History is refigured and made up to serve future ambitions and subtly awaken envy while the present is erased. This project appropriates this theory on market commercial goods and applies it to the ideological realm of the mass games because the effect is still the same. Time is erased, and the future one should strive for is replaced. This is related to the mass games in that the mass games could be seen to instill a sense of envy of the ideal socialist country in the eyes of its North Korean viewers. Within the Arirang Festival are references to the past in the scenes of war and the celebration of all that North Korea was able to achieve afterwards, while also looking to the future of a reunified Korean peninsula under socialism, alongside its partner in socialism, China. Nonetheless, the present is erased. The Arirang Festival is meant to be a celebration of the unity, both spiritually and physically, of the North Korean people under socialism, but the struggles of the people during the arduous march, the famine in the 90s, are erased, and while the festival employs 100,000 gymnasts, musicians, soldiers, and card holders to make the mass games happen, they are not nearly as accessible for civilians living in the countryside as they are for upper-class civilians and military officials who are actually able to partake in and witness the mass games for themselves. In this sense, the Arirang Festival paints a picture of the ideal North Korea by drawing on the past and living in the future while erasing the present, and it is in this way that the mass games resembles publicity. Act 3 is a performance of North Korea's ideal future reunification. Many Western viewers may argue that this scene, and in fact the whole of the Arirang Festival, is propaganda. Moreover, the popular Western opinion is that everything North Korean media produces is nothing more reputable than a horde of lies compiled by the government's journalists and then distributed to homes and schools. And some may see the mass games as no more than the most spectacular example of this. Now, I am not arguing completely against the claim that the mass games is an example of propaganda, but I am suggesting a more informed opinion of what it means to label something as propaganda and where the mass games fits into that label. To define propaganda, I will be focusing on two main qualifiers. First, that it is meant to be informative, and second, that it serves the purposes of a specific ideology. First, I believe the biggest problem lies in the fact that Western perspective has distorted North Korean propaganda to mean anything produced by North Korea, be it news, policies, celebrations, etc., when generally, propaganda is understood as informative. The information conveyed in propaganda may be misleading or largely inaccurate, but it is still conveyed as information that you would see on the news or textbooks. The mass games, although recalling the past, has never claimed to be a source of information to learn the past as the news or a history textbook might. Rather, it is a patriotic celebration of the country's accomplishments, goals, and relationships. It does not claim to be a pool of information where anyone can come and learn all about North Korea. It is, however, where people can come to celebrate the unity of the performers and the accomplishments portrayed, but that does not necessarily mean forgetting everything that is left out in the portrayal of Korean history, although that may be the desired effect if looked at through the lens of Berger's theory discussed earlier. Secondly, the other aspect of defining propaganda as such is that it works to promote a specific ideology, usually of the class in power. This, the mass games definitely does, in its focus on the people of North Korea overcoming their struggles on their own, promoting the national ideology of juche, self-reliance, and in the physical unity of the athletes, the non-competitive aspect of the games, and the portrayal of the working class and soldiers promoting the ideology of socialism. While the Arirang Festival certainly promotes their ideology and in this regard can be considered propaganda, what attacks on North Korean propaganda fail to bring to light, however, is how American media does the exact same thing. As Herman and Chomsky point out in their theory of the propaganda model, quote, "The media serve and propagandize on behalf of the powerful societal interests that control and finance them. The representatives of these interests have important agendas and principles that they want to advance, and they are well positioned to shape and constrain media policy. This is normally not accomplished by crude intervention, but by the selection of right-thinking personnel and by the editors and working journalists' internalization of priorities and definitions of newsworthiness that conform to the institution's policy," end quote. That is to say, American newscasters, in their anti-North Korean sentiment in any related stories, are following right-thinking trends and shaping the media to label North Korean productions, such as the mass games, as propaganda, and to internalize fanning the flames of North Korean paranoia. Just look at George W. Bush's labeling North Korea as part of the axis of evil, or Seth Rogen's recent movie, The Interview. Sorry. In doing this, American media is adding to the propaganda model it claims so vehemently to come against. If propaganda is the promotion of a set of ideologies, then US media is no less guilty than North Korea, and making a distinction between publicity and propaganda may only be hurting perceptions of North Korean and American media. What I mean by this is that American media draws a binary between the DPRK and the US. America is capitalist and North Korea is communist. American media is publicity and North Korean media is propaganda. Drawing this binary allows US media to provide a narrative of North Korea as the villain, but as the above analysis of propaganda and publicity shows, the two are very much related, especially in their promotion of the ruling class's ideology. So my argument is that labeling something that comes out of North Korea like the mass games as propaganda is valid, but it is not grounds to turn a blind eye to the publicity/propaganda of American media and only look at the defects of North Korean media. Sorry. Now here's a short clip of Act 2. So here's a short clip of Act 2 of the Arirang Festival demonstrating North Korea's achievements in education. The aesthetics of what you're about to see is the most prominent aspect of this clip, so I'd just like to make the disclaimer that the aesthetics of the show is the subject of most academic works on the mass games, which is why my project focused more on the ideological political aspect of the mass games. The text currently displayed on the screen roughly translates to, "We have nothing to envy in this world," which was my inspiration for drawing on Berger's theory of the use of envy in publicity. Publicity tries to convince its subjects that they can be the object of others' envy, as opposed to envying others if they simply buy into whatever the publicity is selling. In this scene, it's the North Korean educational system.